Say thank you to Dorothy. You owe her one. Aloha everybody, Sean at Aloha Pigeons, and I'm going to be giving you an update on our first 2018 young bird toss from the island of Molokai to the island of Oahu. So it's actually been 5 days since that release, and unfortunately we had terrible returns. I sent a total of 54 birds on that first Molokai toss, and 2 of those were old birds, and 52 of them were the young birds for this year. Unfortunately, none of the young birds came back the first day, so I only got both old birds back the first day, and they both came back by themselves, and you saw that in the last video. The GPS tracking band was on one of those old birds, and I had one other GPS tracking band on one of the birds that day, and it was on a young bird. Unfortunately, that bird never came back. The second day, I had 3 young birds that actually returned, and the third day I had 1 young bird return, the 4th day was nothing, and the 5th day today was nothing. However, I did receive a phone call this morning from a very nice lady named Dorothy on the island of Molokai, and she said she had a pigeon that was hanging around her house with a band on it. So she was nice enough to look at what the number was on that band, research it a little bit, and get in touch with the racers here on Oahu, which then got her in touch with me. And she was nice enough to take that bird to the airport at Molokai, and that's what I have in this box. And strangely enough, and luckily enough, that one bird that she found was the bird that I had a GPS band on. Now, I haven't downloaded the data yet. I just got back from the airport. The bird does look very skinny, but it should put on weight within the next few days. I don't know if you can tell, but you see how you can see the keel of the bird so pronounced like that? It's just because she's so skinny, she hasn't been getting feed. And here's the GPS band that's on her now, and I haven't taken it off yet. But I will take that off and download the data, and we'll see where she ended up throughout that day that I released her, because it should have recorded for about 10 hours, maybe a little less. She looks fairly alert. She's just really skinny. Say thank you to Dorothy. Where did all the other birds go? Okay, I have the GPS band made by Sky Leader that we recovered from the bird we just received today. So this is the only young bird that had a GPS ring on. So let's see. Now this bird never came back, and the GPS band should record for about 9 to 10 hours. So we'll get to see where it ended up flying on the island of Molokai. Looks like it had an issue with the battery. Let's see if I can fix that. Now this band was on this bird for 5 days while it was off island, out in the elements, so I'm not sure if the band was damaged in any way, if it got wet. There it goes, it's downloading. Alright, excellent. Okay, hopefully it goes through. Oh, the reading's complete. Oh my goodness! What in the world? Oh my god. It flew to the island of Lanai. I would have never thought that bird did that. They would have done that. For some reason, it flew around Molokai for a while and then went to the island of Lanai before the battery ran out. Wow, and that's kind of sad. So the bird did actually try and cross a channel. It just went to the wrong island. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like it landed on Lanai right here because of all the reported position points over here. If I click on this one, this was at 10:07 in the morning. If I click on this one, that was at 2:54 in the afternoon. So in other words, it flew to Lanai, landed here just after 10 o'clock in the morning, and then decided to fly back to Molokai just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh my goodness, these birds were all turned around. They didn't know where to go. So I just got word that another one of my young birds was found. And I can't believe it, but it was found on the island of Maui, and that's where my cursor is right here. So some of my birds, or at least that bird, went from the island of Molokai to the island of Maui. So I don't know what to make of this, because the GPS data we just downloaded showed the bird going to Lanai and then back to Molokai. I had a total of 4 young birds make their way back to Oahu in the following days after I released them on Molokai. So I don't know. I mean, they crossed 3 different ocean channels to get to 3 different islands from the island of Molokai. But what I have on the screen right now is a comparison between the SkyLeader GPS data from the old bird that returned the first day, and that's in red. And then we have the data from the SkyLeader GPS from the young bird, which was rescued from the island of Molokai, and that's in blue. So we can compare and see where they actually started to break off from one another and see if that will show any information. So I'm going to zoom in. They were both released at the same time. Looks like they stuck together while they went to the south shore of Molokai, and they both turned around with each other. And it looks like they separated when they flew to the north side of Molokai. So it looks like the old bird, the red track, continued to the north side of Molokai, and this is where it landed. It eventually took off again, flew up to the highest point on the island, this mountain right here. And then from there, I can only presume that it got a good vantage to the island of vantage point to the island of Oahu, because it made it pretty much a straight line back to the island of Oahu, where its loft is, where its home is. Unfortunately, this young bird, and I don't know how many birds went with each group, so it split up from that old bird right here, and it made a 90-degree turn back east in the wrong direction, and it came down to the south point of Molokai, and it must have seen the island of Lanai, because it crossed that channel. Here we can click on this point. It was at 227 meters at this point, and looks like it continued across the channel 156 meters. It climbed up a little bit, 314 meters at that point. Well, that's an error on the altitude. I'm not sure what causes this error. I don't know if it's really low to the ground or maybe it's below sea level. Yeah, see, the next point is at 1 meter. So maybe when it has an error in the recorded altitude like it did at this spot, it's because it's below sea level. Because, you know, there's a little bit of a deviation. I don't know how accurate it is. But this next spot was 1 meter, so, you know, it's a little over 3 feet off the water surface, or at least what it knows as the water surface. And it climbed up a little bit, 41 meters, 55 meters, so it's staying pretty close to the water. Climbed up as it reached Lanai. And then, like I said, I don't know if it was by itself or not, because this is the only GPS band that was following this track. And it landed here on the south side of Lanai. Let's change this to a satellite image so we can see what the terrain looked like there. Wow, it's pretty much just a cliff line right there. So I know these waypoints are scattered a little bit. It doesn't mean that it was flying actually. Let's click on this one out here. Well, this one, it might have been flying right here. So it was going 60 meters per minute out here. So maybe it was flying a little bit, but once I get to these points in here, it should be closer to 0, or it should indicate 0, yeah. So the speed was 0 right here, is at 52 meters. So all the points around here should be at 0, which it looks like they are. Let's see, so when it left this area, it looks like it was 2:50 in the afternoon. When it was approaching this area, it was just after 10 o'clock in the morning. So what is that, 4.5 hours it stayed in this area right here, and who knows how many other birds were with it. And then it decided to fly back to Molokai for some reason. And let's see, what altitude was it at in the middle? 69 meters, so still pretty low. and it continued north along the island, continued up here, 154 meters, going pretty slow, 526 meters per minute. And then, it's strange. It did something similar to what that old bird did. It started heading towards the highest point of Molokai, this mountain, climbing up 366 meters, 417 meters, all the way up to its last recorded position, which was 437 meters. Unfortunately, this bird never came back to Oahu. However, presumably there was 4 other birds that did come back to Oahu that could have been with this bird. Now, if they were with this bird and they did go to Lanai, then the birds that came back to Oahu, they have the experience of crossing what I know at least one channel to Lanai if they were with them, and then it crossed another channel to Oahu either the second day or third day after they were released, which, they have lots of experience, so they should know what this area looks like. So their first release for the races here in Hawaii would be from the island of Maui. Now, what's also interesting is, since this bird that was just recently found on Maui, I don't know if maybe the young birds that did come back from Molokai to Oahu, maybe they even went to Maui, in which case they crossed quite a few channels before they made the decision to go to Oahu. Now, I'm trying to think of reasons why these birds would have flown to Lanai. So the week around the release time from Molokai, when I would release the birds for training from the east side of Oahu here, I could see Molokai most of the time. However, it was pretty hazy, so the visibility for these birds may have hurt them a little bit due to the weather. There's quite a bit of haze. We do have a lot of volcanic activity happening on the Big Island, which is east of this, and sometimes some of that haze from that fog blows towards Oahu, and it can obscure the visibility of these islands. So on a normal, typical, clear day, you can see Molokai from Oahu quite easily. And last year, thinking back to 2017's young birds and their release from the island of Molokai, I did drive them to the west coast of Molokai, which could have helped them because maybe they could identify Oahu much easier. But one thing I can say for sure, last year the visibility was much better than this year. So in other words, they had a clear view of the island of Oahu. In addition to that, it was not windy the day I released them last year. So those are 2 things that I'm thinking that really affected me on this release this year. It was quite windy, 25 miles per hour, gusting above that, and the visibility wasn't as good as it has been for me in the past when I released on Molokai. Especially the first time. I think the first time these birds are released on the island of Molokai, they need to have pretty optimal conditions because they cannot think back to like a past experience that they have made this crossing before. In other words, visual cues on the island of Molokai, like they get to the northwest point of Molokai right here and they know that they continue in that direction to get to Oahu. They don't have that knowledge. So they pretty much have to rely on line of sight and what they can see. Some people say they use the magnetic field. I don't know. It sure didn't help them here because they were flying the wrong direction. They were flying east towards the island of Maui when I initially released them. So it really seems like their vision plays a big role. And if the weather is hindering that, you might not have the best returns because this old bird even had to fly to the highest point, which I'm presumably they got a better vantage of Oahu, and that's why it made a straight line. I mean, it turned 90 degrees back to Oahu and just continued that way. So, next time I release, especially a first release off island from the island of Molokai with young birds, if they've never done it before, I think I should put more emphasis on picking a day that is just very clear visibility, less wind, because other flyers have been telling me that a windier day is going to cause them to fly much lower, and we could see that when it was crossing the channel here, and the old bird when it was crossing the channel was quite windy. So the the calmer the wind, the higher the birds will fly, which could give them a better vantage point of Oahu. So why it flew to Lanai and why my bird was found on Maui, I can only assume it's because that's the islands that they had a clear view of. Lanai is much closer to Molokai than Oahu is to Molokai. So maybe they were trying to explore the options that were most apparent to them. This was the island that was the clearest to them, so they tried that island. But it didn't work, and they actually went back to Molokai, which was kind of interesting. I don't know, those are the takeaways I've got so far. I really do appreciate everybody that's been leaving comments on what they feel could have caused this problem, but right now I'm pretty much decided on it was due to the higher winds causing them to fly lower and the reduced visibility making it difficult for these young birds to see the island of Oahu. So that's really the takeaway I got from this. Emphasis on less wind when I release these young birds, as well as the best visibility I can pick. Unfortunately, you know, with young birds, you have a limited time of preparing them for their first race, which is from the island of Maui. So I did feel a bit of pressure that, you know, I wanted to get a few tosses from the island of Molokai, maybe even a toss or two from the island of Lanai before that first race. So I was running out of time, so I sent them on this flight on this day when, you know, maybe I should have waited for a day that had a little better weather. However, there was no rain that day, very little in the way of cloud coverage. So it was a nice sunny day. It was just the wind and maybe a little bit of haze in there that prevented them from seeing Oahu possibly. Again, these are kind of guesses, but I'm kind of using the data from the Sky Leader GPS to, you know, analyze what actually happened that day, which I'm really glad that I got this bird back from Dorothy today, because otherwise I would have never known that they went to the island of Lanai. And it's just very interesting that another one of my birds that was released with all these birds was found on the island of Maui. And I also want to give you an update on Eva. Eva was the hand-raised bird I had in one of my last videos, and she's doing very well. There's Eva. Come on. Bye, Eva. And Eva is actually a mix. She is some sort of owl. I can't remember if it's a German owl or a Chinese owl. Probably a German, and mixed with a homer. And originally I was going to use her as a dropper for my racing birds, but I don't know, maybe I will in the future. She doesn't really fly far, but she will fly around a little bit. But she's pretty tame because I hand raised her and she hasn't been around other pigeons too much. Look at all those birds, Eva. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing an update on the 2018 young birds here in the state of Hawaii, as well as an update on how Eva's been doing, as well as the data we downloaded from the Sky Leader GPS bands from their first off-island release. I'll continue to load updates with the remaining birds that we have for this 2018 young bird season. This is Sean at Aloha Pigeons. Aloha, everybody. Want to say goodbye to everybody on YouTube? Eva, you want to be a dropper? Or do you just want to be a pet? Are you a pet pigeon?